I love this concept of macrobiotic, that there's no good food or bad food. It's just more of like eating consciously, and the nature, or like everything we consume, is one. Like, we are nature.
Yoko, thanks for coming on the podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here, Alex. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. We've got some really cool stuff to talk about today, but to start, what is the sweatiest you've ever been?
Great, because I knew that this question was going to come, so I'm kind of prepared. I do have an infrared sauna at home, so probably that's when I was getting really sweaty in my sauna. I do this protocol maybe about three, 4 times a year, which is like really high dose of niacin. I don't know if you've done that yet.
Yeah, I've heard about that, but I've never done it. Tell me a bit more about what that's like.
Yeah, so I think the last time I did that was, I think, end of December. And I usually just like, I don't really have a set time or anything like that. It's just more of that, like, I feel like my body needs it, and then I do that. So end of last year, so what you do is to just take a high dose of niacin, but I usually start with about 250. So 250 is about the daily dose of niacin. Niacin is a vitamin B3.
Is that milligrams?
Yeah, milligrams. And then I'll build it up to about 1,500. So it's a high dose, but you just do it slowly because your body will get used to the dose. And you take it and then get into the sauna and you just sweat like crazy. But you have to make sure that that niacin or vitamin B3 is not the time release one. It has to be the flushing type. So you get super uncomfortable, like you get itchy and you get like really red, like all of the body. But apparently that's one of the most powerful way to detox your heavy metals and things like that. So yeah, I get so much out of it. It's amazing. You feel so great after. And I usually just finish off with either, like dry brushing the skin if it's not too tingly, and then have a cold shower. And then if I finish off with maybe taking either zeolite or charcoal or something like that as well.
Your skin would be looking amazing after that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And because you're actually stimulating the skin, the pores and all that stuff too. So it's great for your skin, like even helping to produce collagen and, all that stuff too. But yeah, detox properties are, the benefits amazing from that.
Is niacin also I can't remember exactly how it works. Is it kind of like flush blood to the skin, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. To the surface of the skin. And it helps move the toxins as well. So that's why it's so powerful.
I was listening to a body hacking, a biohacking guy recently. I can't recall his name, and he was talking about that. Did you kind of get into that sort of biohacking world a little bit when you were learning about those things?
Yeah. I don't really think this is biohacking. I mean, when I hear a word biohacking, it's more like a kind of crazy stuff, like, some people even put like compass or something in the body, or, that sort of thing. That's pretty crazy. But this is I just see it as like a health protocol. Yeah, but it's really interesting, the biohacking world, for sure.
Yeah, it can. I know what you mean. It can get a bit extreme sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love, as you know, I love ancient, like traditional, health kind of, approach. But also, I'm fascinated by this kind of modern technology, and I don't usually take isolated compounds, even like vitamin C or, vitamin Bs, or I tend to take all these nutrients through like real food and, different herbs and stuff like that. But when we are talking about more modern science and, this way of things, you do go for, isolated compounds, which is quite fascinating too.
Yeah. Is the reason, what's the reason that you don't typically go for isolated compounds?
I just don't see it as like I always wonder, like, does body actually recognize that compounds just on its own? And I don't know, I think humans, we think we're smarter than the nature. And we kind of trying to, I don't know, do something. But it's fun. It's just a journey. And we kind of experiment with that and all that stuff. And I mean, you can take it like medicinally maybe for short term. But yeah, it's just not something that like I'm drawn to, really.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point. You know, I think there's a macro, I think about it as in like there's a macro and a micro of health, right? So oftentimes when we get into the science articles, we can really drill down and okay, I'm going to take this niacin and it's going to have this reaction and then this will happen. And it's a real like cause effect way at looking at health. And I think that there's a purpose for that. However, we have to zoom out and look at the macro of health and look at the whole holistic approach and really understand that, sometimes taking things in, as just one compound, I think we don't really know the true effects of that. Does the body recognize it? Is it causing other, reactions within the body that we aren't aware, or when, the science, people weren't studying at the time because they were just focusing on one reaction or something like that. So
yeah, for sure. And then different compounds react differently, like together, like sometimes it works in synergy. So I think when we're going to talk about different herbs and stuff like that, and why I choose like my extraction methods and stuff like that, and that's the core of it. Like the herbs should be consumed in more the holistic way, not just looking for active ingredients like polysaccharides. I mean, they're all exciting things and there's heaps of research behind it. But I think when it comes to especially like traditional herbs and stuff like that, then I usually like to take it in as like natural form as possible.
Yeah. Can also be more fun that way as well.
I think so. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know, maybe this is just going straight to the herbalism, but there's a wisdom, around herbs. It's not the health benefits. Of course, they're like different compounds that we are looking for, but I always believe that when you consume herbs, there's some sort of teaching and wisdom around it. So if you're concentrating things too much, if you're isolating the compounds too much, you might be like upgrading those compounds, but you're losing that wisdom in the teaching. That's how I see things anyway.
Yeah, that's fascinating actually. How do you kind of learn the wisdom of herbs? You've done kind of extensive research, I guess, and learnings about those things. How do you kind of is it something that you kind of tap into, or is it something that you just kind of learn over time through using them?
You have to use it. Like you can't just read about it and know. And, I think as you're more sensitive to different energies and you're more in tune with your body, then you will start feeling that. And it's not something that I think people can just read and like learn about it. You just have to experiment and you feel it like, some beautiful herbs like reishi, or like gynostemma. When you even meditate and you take it, or in empty stomach, we've been fasting for a couple of days and you take things like that and you feel that just coming in and you feel that like groundness and like spiritual energy from it. And that's why it's so important to choose something that's like really high quality and having that respect for the herbs. I mean, medicinal mushrooms and all that stuff has been so like, it's been popular, everyone's been talking about it and that's a really great thing. But then like, are we actually respecting their culture and tradition? I'm excited about the movement, but also I think this is really important to understand like where the herbs come from and how much are we we need to look after them to be able to get that return is kind of in the wrong way of saying it. But like for example, like because medicinal mushroom has been so popular, those wild mushroom has been overtaken from the forest, and so like I'm working with a supplier who actually respects those things. So when they go into the forest and get wild harvested chaga, they don't take the whole thing, they just leave some of it behind. And like, do people actually understand that sort of thing? It kind of makes me wonder. And I really hope that we are actually starting to talk about that side of thing, not so much the health benefit of things, but just more of that like respect and intuitive and consciously consuming these herbs. And I think when you're open to that sort of things, then I think you get more benefit, and you have that conversation with the herbs, and you're drawn to certain things. And that's how you kind of learn to navigate the overwhelm. I think when people are starting to, get into this kind of thing, it's like, where do I start? Like how, like which one to start? And it's good to just start with like one or two that you're drawn to. And I do believe that when you're like drawn to something, then maybe those herbs are actually communicating with you, and then you start with that, and you become more intuitive, and you become more sensitive, and you're grateful, for the benefits that you're getting, and then you start exploring more. So I think it's a great cycle, I think, when you think about it that way.
Yeah, I love that, even just respect in the way that we eat, and consume, like you said, when you cut up a piece of papaya, which a lot of my listeners by now probably know I like a lot. There is like when you've got it in front of you and you cut it up and you scrape the seeds out, and maybe you take the time to cut the skin off and you cut it up into little pieces, and then you put it in a bowl, and then you look at it and you smell it into your being, and then you look at it and you think, oh, what does this look like? And you think about it growing on the tree, and then you think about how it started small and it got bigger, and now it's this orange thing and it smells so fruity. And then you just take a little bite and you just let it melt in your mouth, and you feel the sensation of it going through your body. And
oh my God. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's conscious consumption. And I find like when I properly do that, I eat less. I enjoy it more, and the other important thing there is that it does have to be high quality, because when it is high quality, in this case, organic, or, if we're talking about medicinal mushrooms or herbs, it's sourced from somewhere that's sustainable and the plant's treated with respect. Like all these things influence the final experience when you're consuming it. And and you sit there and you got this organic papaya there, and it's just the depth of flavor. I love fruit because every piece of fruit tastes different. You can have two papayas next to each other. They're completely different, and there's this complexity to it. And there's this satiety to it, which you just don't get if you just like cutting a piece of fruit, smashing it down. It's from Woolies, which is okay if that's where you're at. But I think it's the same thing, perhaps even more so with herbalism, I would imagine, because these plants are quite delicate and they're quite powerful, right? Like they have medicinal properties, and they can really have a big effect on our overall physiology. I imagine it would be even more important to make sure they're cultivated correctly and really looked after and respected, so the end user gets that full experience that they can offer.
Yeah, of course. And then I think it's important to do some research and just knowing, I'm a big fan of, like including herbs and stuff like that in the culinary sense, making bliss balls and cakes and stuff like that with herbs, or making smoothies and adding astragalus and schisandra and things like that. And it's all fun and it's creative. And I do that all the time. I've got, functional foods that contain all of that. But that the most beneficial way to consume these herbs is just to make tea, just with hot water. So you're actually tasting the herbs. That's why I don't do capsules. I just, of course there's a place for it, and if people don't like the taste and stuff like that, then I get it. But when you taste food and herbs, it's a different experience. That's the communication that I'm talking about. So just like having just tea with like hot water, that I think that's the best way for me anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a purity to that, it's just the raw experience of whatever it is that you're consuming. Yeah, no, I love that. How did you actually get into herbalism? Like, when did it all begin for you?
So, when I just go back a long time ago, not a long time, I suppose I started becoming more interested in health and wellness when I got pregnant. So that was 18 years ago. So I kind of started experimenting with like healthy eating. And back then that was like low fat, low fat cottage cheese. Yeah. And crackers, I suppose, like whole wheat crackers. But then I started getting into macrobiotic. So if anyone like doesn't really know what that means, macrobiotic is more of like a lifestyle choice and philosophy around food, as well as like quite woo-woo stuff like cosmos and universe and, all that stuff. So we talk a lot about energy of food, yin and yang. Of course, there's like a eating guideline, which is mostly plant-based. But it's not like veganism or plant-based or paleo or anything like that. It's just that they don't say this is bad or this is bad. There's no bad food or good food. It's just more that we have to, what they say, that the teaching is more of that understanding of the energetic of the food. So, for example, like animal food contains a lot of energy, like it's more yang, it's more contractive, it's more aggressive, it's more masculine energy. But then when you compare, like say, fruit, it's more yin, it's more watery, more feminine, more expansive energy. It's not that like you can't say, oh, this is yin and this is yang. It's more of the comparison. So, for example, I say if you're comparing chicken and carrot, then carrot will be more yin because it's more it's vegetables, less dense. But then when you're comparing carrot to say lettuce will be more yin because it's more light, because I suppose carrot is a root vegetable, so it's more concentrated in energy, and lettuce grows upwards, so that's more expensive. And that applies to, the food that you eat, the feelings that you get, the conversation that you have, the thoughts that you have. Everything is energy, I suppose, if you believe that. So when you consume food or your thoughts and all these things, it becomes part of you and it changes the state of mind. So what macrobiotic teaching recommends is to have more kind of neutral way of living. So, like say, a lot of Zen Buddhism talk quite a lot about that, like extreme happiness or extreme sadness or extreme aggressiveness. It's not recommended. You want to be more stable and calm. So with macrobiotic, it's kind of a similar idea. Like you don't want to have extreme yin or extreme yang. So when you start kind of thinking that, it's quite interesting, like how even without us knowing about those energies, we kind of tend to do that when you're actually in tune. Like, for example, when you're really stressed, like straight after work, your energy is really yang, like it's really contracted. You're quite aggressive. You've got this masculine energy, and what you want to do is to relax, and what you reach out for would be something like a glass of wine, right? Or like a piece of chocolate cake, because there's so more yin. So your body is kind of like your body is trying to balance itself without us kind of knowing. But then when you're talking about, it's like seesaw. If you do extreme yang and yin and all the time, the things will start breaking. So it's okay to, it's most important thing is to know like your state of mind. Like you realize, okay, you're really contracted, you're like stressed. So are you going to go for one glass of wine, or are you going to go for 2 and 3? And are you going to go for refined sugar chocolate cake, or are you going to go for like cake that's made with like whole food and natural sugar, or dates, or just fruit? Or are you just going to not go for the food to expand your energy and relax? Or are you going to do maybe some other, way of relaxing, like self-care, meditation, having a bath? I think when you start just stopping and then just decide consciously, and it's okay to have like cakes if that's what you choose to do, but then it's always like whatever you do is energetic and there's consequences. And I think when you start like living like that, then you're not like just living mindlessly, and that applies to any food. And so I love this concept of macrobiotic, that there's no good food or bad food. It's just more of like eating consciously, and the nature, or like everything we consume is one, like we are nature. So that's kind of how I started getting into this like energies and herbs and like, I suppose food as medicine kind of thing. So I kind of got into that, and then I wanted to learn more about it. So I studied holistic nutrition, and one of the theses that I had to write was on raw food. So even though macrobiotics diet is quite different from raw food, most of the meals are cooked in macrobiotic. But when I started eating raw food, just like my state of energy just changed. My energy was like so much better. My mood was better. And I'm not saying macrobiotic was bad. It's just different phase of life, and that's important too. That's long, like when you are intuitive and we understand that the inner body changes, and your lifestyle changes, and you have to be, I think, open-minded enough to be able to be flexible and adapt to different situations, and your diet might change. So that's how I kind of got onto raw food, and to kind of complement that as well. And I have a Japanese background, so kind of used to. I grew up with this concept of Eastern medicine and having herbs in the diet and mushrooms in the diet. So it wasn't really foreign to me. So I was kind of using herbalism, like in making a lot of different teas, medicinal teas, broth, and then having raw food at the same time. And I think it's a really great combination, because yin, like raw food can be really yin and makes people cold as well, especially like when you're living in a place like Melbourne. So it's just good to have something that that's warming to the body, which is tea, and just kind of removing the dampness in the spleen and helping with the digestion and your chi, your prana, as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also when you're eating raw, you're at a higher level of energy and your body is a bit cleaner too. And so I find the effects of herbs more noticeable. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think you get super intuitive and you get really sensitive. And that's what I love about raw food as well. I mean, I can't just say raw food did that, but I definitely became more like wanting to explore spirituality, while eating raw food, for sure.
Yeah, it opens up your consciousness. I don't know however else to describe that. Can we talk a little bit more about yin and yang, and what are the typical, properties that would be associated with one or the other?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, yin food, yin would be more expansive, more feminine, more soft, more watery energy. So yin food would be, vegetables, fruit. It's a different level, I suppose, of the yin, but mostly vegetables, fruit. But extreme yin would be refined sugar and dairy. And then yang food would be more towards animal food and really salty food. And neutral food would be more like legumes, grain, that sort of thing. And that's why macrobiotic, they do a lot of grain and legumes, and a little bit more seaweed and natural salt for yang, and heaps of vegetables, I suppose, for more yin. and they don't really usually do nightshade vegetables, or like extreme foods might not be recommended, like, animal foods or refined sugar, refined flour. But then, it's quite like interesting, like how, so, we're talking about, so there's no food that's good or bad. Like, you can kind of change the state of mind eating that sort of food. So you might consciously choose that. And especially, like for me, because I live in this like busy modern, society, I live in a city and I run a business, like I'm a single mom. So like my life is quite young, and I kind of tend to get really contracted, and I'm kind of on the go all the time. So I think that's why like raw food is really beneficial for me, because it's a bit more yang and a bit more like relaxing and expensive, and more has that more kind of feminine energy that I need. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, that's cool. And I like how you've kind of likened it to other areas of your life too. For me, it's always about like yang is like the doing, going forth and taking action and that sort of thing. And for a long time, I struggled with that because that's all I was doing. I was working every day. I was having coffee. I was getting shit done, like that whole entrepreneurial mentality, if you will, business owner mentality. And I wasn't balancing that out. I was running in the morning. I was just doing stuff, I was in that phase of my life. And you just feel like you're just kind of constantly on the treadmill. And I wasn't meditating, and I wasn't taking baths or having, even a sauna at a low temperature. Like, don't cook yourself, like I wasn't taking that time. I wasn't, reading a book or just sitting in silence and staring at a tree, like, And it's really important, because we need balance. We need to find this balance in our health. Otherwise we can end up with issues. And I love the yin and the yang for that, because it's a perfect way to explain that. And I'm not trained in, Eastern philosophy or anything like that, but that's how I kind of see and perceive it. And I'm curious, like, are you conscious during the day as to the activities you're doing and thinking, I might need some more yin things when I get home, or I've been doing yin activities all day, like I need to balance that out with some yang? Do you think about it in that way?
Yeah, I suppose I do, but I mean, I don't like say, I'm just so yin right now, but I would just be like, I'm just been too much like chilling like right now. So I feel like I need to get up and move. And I think it's just all about your, your body communicating. So you need to have that training to listen to your body. But then I do kind of stop, like when I'm kind of reaching out something out of habit. I'm super healthy. Like I'm, like the way I eat and the lifestyle is pretty healthy. But then now and then I kind of have an urge to do something out of my habit. So that's when I like really stop and think, okay, so what state am I in? And then so maybe I need this instead of reaching out to that sort of thing. There's just that like stopping to see like where I am, what state I am, or yin or yang, or any other way. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like when you notice that you're kind of like lashing out for something. Take stock of that and think, okay, hold on a second here.
What's going on?
Really going on? Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah, cool. No, I like that. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the specific herbs that you talk about. I've seen you talk about astragalus and gynostemma, and some of these things are even foreign to me. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about those and how to kind of use them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, all the products that I carry are usually tonic herbs or some like herbs that are quite safe to use for general health. And of course, it's not for everyone. But like the main herbs that I would probably, I mean, it depends on what you're working on. Like when people ask me, like, where do I start? Like, what do I start? Then we, usually talk about, I think you're quite familiar with that street treasure, like a Jing, Qi, Shem. So Jing is more of the primal energy in kidneys. So when you're working on more like anti-aging, kind of longevity, that sort of thing, then I might recommend more Jing based herbs. But if you're wanting more of the prana, chi, and your digestion, your respiratory system, then I might recommend something more chi, or immunity. That's more chi. So that's astragalus, Siberian ginseng, things like that. And then if you want to move on to more shem, this more spiritual energy, then I might give you even like poria, polygala, even asparagus roots, things like that. But if you're not really sure, then you could even go for more of the adaptogenic herbs. So adaptogens, so they are the herbs that will help your body adapt to different stresses. So it can be a stress, like physical stress, it can be emotional stress, it can be like spiritual, spirituality, stress, whatever that is, that will kind of help you bring into your homeostasis. So there's not many adaptogens in the world, but the basic one, I would say like Gynostemma, even holy basil, which is like an Indian tea herb. It's really easy to take. Rhodiola, medicinal mushrooms like reishi, schisandra is one. So adaptogens are really like good way to maybe start, because it can kind of do so many different things. But again, it's not for everyone. Like, for example, rhodiola is supposed to be so amazing, like adaptogen, but every time I try to take it, I get nauseous. Like I feel really sick, so you still have to do a small dose to start and just to see how your body is going. And don't get hung up on just like one thing. Just because everyone says this is great, it might not be good for you. It's just move on and just try another things, because there's so many different herbs that will be more suitable. Like some people don't even do reishi, even though reishi is like, like everyone's like, oh my God, I love reishi. But, for some people it might not work, and it's okay. It doesn't work. It's not, it's nothing wrong. We just move on to another one that's calling your name. Yeah.
What actually is Gynostemma? Because I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. Gynostemma is like, I'm sure you've like heard me going on about it on Instagram, but I love this herb. Gynostemma is like, it tastes like a tea, but it's no caffeine, but it's a plant. So I drink it as a tea. It's an adaptogen, but it's not really a herb that has been used for a long time. It's a folk herb. And how they found it is that the bunch of Japanese companies, they wanted to find something similar to stevia. So it's like a sugar alternative. And they went to this part of China and they found that those people who are living in the area was like living so much longer, like really healthy. And they tested Gynostemma, not just the sweetener, but for the medicinal properties. And they found that they act like ginseng. They got the similar compounds to ginseng. And and they found so many like health benefits. But it just tastes so much.
Is it like the leaf or is it the root?
It's a leaf. Yeah, it's a 5-leaf. So you can find 3 or 5 leaf Gynostemma, but I always go for the 5-leaf Gynostemma. And, like how my supplier harvest is just only like once a year, because a lot of places, and I think different herbs as well, but you can harvest more than once a year, but it kind of drops the medicinal property of the Gynostemma. So, I mean, again, we're going back to the quality and like how knowledgeable your supplier is and how knowledgeable and respectful the farmers are, But yeah, God, Gynostemma is just so amazing. Like every time, you can have it anytime. It's energizing. but it's calming at the same time, and it brings your, say, because it is adaptation. So if you're overweight, it will help your body become more stable in weight. But if you're underweight, it might bring it up to the normal level. Just that sort of like intelligence in Gynostemma is just so beautiful.
Yeah, wow. I guess it just shows the power of adaptogens, right? And how they work in the body. They can really help us find a state of homeostasis.
Yeah, but I mean, not all adaptogens are the same. Like we're talking about, it's a homeostasis, but some adaptogens are more energizing, like ginseng. Ginseng are adaptogens, but they can be quite stimulating. But reishi can be more calming. So you do have to kind of find the one that suits you and suits your lifestyle. And you do have to have that knowledge still, even though adaptogens are great for so many people. Like when you take ginseng, and there's so many different types of ginseng too. But if you take Korean ginseng, it's like so fiery and so hot. So if your constitution is hot already, it's going to be like, it's going to create imbalance, right? So you do kind of have to understand, like herbalism is really fun and you want to experiment, but then again, like you're just going back to the respects of knowledge of like what you're taking is important too. Yeah.
You talk a bit about fire, and earlier you mentioned dampness, which I found quite funny, given you were referring to Melbourne and the coldness, because it can be quite damp. What's actually going on there? Is that's a Eastern traditional Chinese medicine thing, right? Where we have like dampness and heat. What are you referring to there?
Yeah, so a lot of Eastern philosophies, they recommend cooking all the food because of that, I think. Because, they believe, and I also do believe, that when you consume food, your digestion should be fiery and dry to be able to cook your food, So I kind of get that philosophy as well. But there's so many ways to, because I think I've found like raw food so beneficial for my mood, for for enzymes, and the vibration of the food is just so different from cooked food. So I kind of complement that with making tea, but especially tea that disperses that dampness from the spleen and fires your digestion up. So even if you're not talking about medicinal herbs, you can add different spices into your diet, like cinnamon, the black pepper, ginger, tiny bit of chili. When you have like chili is hot and it's creates heat, but when you consume too much heat or too much chili, actually cools you down. So you kind of have to be careful with the amount of the chili that you use. But even ginger, like depending on like how it's been processed, the heat, the fire, the level of the fire changes as well. So if you have raw ginger compared to roasted ginger or deep fried ginger, the fireness, the hotness is quite different. Like other Indian herbs like cardamom, fennel, they all like work to kind of dry your digestive system, heat up your digestive system. So it might be a good idea to include something like that when you're eating a lot of raw food, especially in winter, and when you're consuming a lot of yin food, and also the herbs to look out for. Because of that, I love these herbs is white atractylose. That's if you're eating like raw food, white atractylose is like your best friend.
What is that?
It's like another Chinese herbs, but it's known to like disperse dampness from your spleen. And also like taking more chi herbs, like astragalus is great because that works on your immunity and digestion. And also poria is another one that's good for digestion. So poria is another mushroom.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you're talking about dampness, we can have heat, we can have dampness. What else can we have? And how do you kind of find out where you're actually sitting with those things? Like, do you need
I mean, you can get it checked, I suppose, but then you can just go through a really like simple questions to yourself, like say when you go to the toilet, like what's your bowel movement like is it dry, like is it, you know what I mean, dry, or is it more runny? And then that kind of gives you that idea. Like candida issues, yeast infection, and that will kind of it will show you like how damp you are as well. And the coating in the tongue, like if you've got that white coating, then you might be a bit more damp too. Or do you get swelling, you know? So that means I suppose it's something to do with your circulation too, but it might, and circulation as well as your kidney, but then that might be, you know, your dampness might be affecting as well. So it's different way of feeling it, but I think the best way is to just check your bowel movement.
Yeah. It's critically important. And this is one podcast where you don't need to worry about talking about poo because
great.
We're talking about health. Like you kind of have to talk about poo at some stage, you know, because it's a really good signal, you know, and just as our pee and even our sweat too, like we can learn. Our body's giving us all these signals, you know, and we can learn so much. You know, just last week I finished reading a book by Arnold Ehret, Rational Fasting, and he talks about the hairs on our body being the chimneys, you know, and so if our hairs are smelling, that's because we're putting off all of this gas of crap essentially that's in our body. You know?
That makes sense though.
Totally, yeah. And so all of these things are data for us to assess the quality of our health. You know, certainly our stool, that tells us a lot, right? And same with our pee. So it's a really valuable point. I'm curious as to, you talked a little bit about raw food earlier. How did you find your way into raw food? And like, how did you develop your passion for it the way that you have? Because I guess the side note here is for everyone listening, Yoko makes the most amazing raw food. Like it is, if you hear raw food and you think that just sounds cold and miserable, if you're in Melbourne, you're lucky. Check out Shokuiku. We'll link it at the end of the podcast because your food is amazing at showing people, hey, raw food can be incredible. It can be flavorsome. It doesn't have to be cold necessarily, and you can really recreate anything. And I think it's a great, I guess, way that you've kind of shown your fascination, I guess, in raw food. And I'm just curious as to how you kind of got on that journey.
Yeah, so as I said, I kind of tried it just as a curiosity. So when I tried it, that was maybe like 15 years ago, and not many people in Melbourne or Australia kind of knew what raw food was. But I think it was kind of started to take off in US. So I was just kind of curious to why everyone was talking about it overseas. So I kind of tried it, and then my energy was just so different. My skin was different. And I just felt happier. Like, yeah. So that's kind of how I got into the basics of raw foods. And I'm a quite creative person. And I think these days that's how I express my creativity. And a lot of people say raw food, oh my God, it's like, it's a limit. It's like a vegan is like hard enough, you know, but there's so much limitation, but I don't see it that way. Like I see it as like the opportunity to be more creative. And I just love that aspect of, okay, I might not use this, but what can I use? And just the challenge of like creating something really beautiful with limited ingredients and limited cooking techniques was just so exciting to me. You know, like you go to a cafe and you order a vegan food and it's like toast with avocado. It's like, how like not inspirational is that? So I think that was the challenge that I really enjoyed. And I feel like that's my preferred way of eating, not just for my health, but just the taste and, just the taste of the real food just comes through so much more. So that's kind of how I got into raw food. Yeah.
And so is it like, I think it's really important when we talk about food to not get dogmatic. And I've certainly been guilty of that in the past where I started eating a certain way and I'm like, this is it. I have to eat, and that's somewhat detrimental over time. And so how do you kind of balance understanding that when we eat raw, we're getting live enzymes and the benefits are there. We feel better, taste better. But how do you kind of balance that with also living in 2021, living in...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is my preferred way of eating. And I do that when I cook for myself and I just do that. But then when I go out or when my friends cook me dinner, I don't say, okay, so is this raw or is this organic? Because food is more than what you're consuming, right? You're consuming with friends you love and just the energy that you're creating with your, with your community. And so for me, that's more important than anything else. There are some food that I just don't touch. I don't like deep fried food and things like that. And I don't really do animal food. That's just where I set my boundaries. But other than that, I put more weight on the company and because I get more benefit, I think, from just being easy and just enjoying the company more than just worrying about what I eat, Yeah,
I remember a few years ago, I came across Don Tolman and he talked about how quickly we can heal the body. And he said fasting is quite quick, then maybe juice fasting a bit less quick. And then I remember he always talked about eating raw foods for 90 days. And at the time I was like, how do you do that? What? You must just eat nuts and I don't know, piece of fruit every now and then. Sounded really hard. However, it's interesting to me now that even on this podcast alone, it seems to be coming up a lot in my field because I think the further we get into our health and the more we want to expand our quality of life and our health, raw foods are a part of that because it's living food, and we're not ruining the food by cooking it all the time or certainly not deep frying it and creating these toxic compounds on the foods at high temperatures and whatnot, So it's interesting to me that it keeps coming up. I'm actually conscious in my mind. I'm like, do I keep wanting to just talking about raw foods on the podcast all the time? People might get bored, but if we're serious about taking our health to the next level, it's kind of important, to at least try and do it for a period of time.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be 100% for sure. And I mean, I do say, okay, so I do raw food, but I consider my food as a living food, not so much. So that's why I still eat, I still do miso, I still do, natto. I still, do cooked food, but that's fermented, or sprouted, all my nuts are activated, you know what I mean? So there's a difference between just raw food and living food. But yeah, definitely. I think I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point. Actually, living food is the key thing there. It's alive and it's giving us the most energy, the most life force that it can. You do some raw food resets. How do they kind of work, and what are the experiences that your clients typically have when they do that with you?
Yeah, so I'm running raw food resets as well as advanced resets. So once a month, and that's a 5-day, I suppose, experience of. So if you're doing a raw food reset, just raw food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I've done, I think, 4 times already, and everyone just amazes. I mean, all the people who used to come to the cafe, they would say that too. It's why is this so tasty? I think they're just amazed with the flavor and the texture of how raw food can be just so tasteful. And
what are some of the dishes that you, I guess, prescribe or make during that?
Yeah, so for breakfast, like there could be smoothie, it could be porridge, it could be daiji pudding or, things like that. For lunch, dinner, it could go also, of course, salad, but, I make a really tasty salad using different dressings. We could do pizza, we'll do like lasagna, we do pasta with like Alfredo sauce. Even do like curry and, all that stuff, but just using vegetables and nuts and seeds and fruit, which is just so amazing. But I do use, different techniques and equipment, like dehydrator. And we do have to have like a blender and a food processor. That sort of thing can come in handy. But, if you're just starting out, like if you've got a food processor and blender, and if you don't have a dehydrator, use an oven at lowest temperature. And you can make pretty much everything. And so that's raw food research.
How do you make a curry raw? Like, how do you even do that?
Yeah. We use a lot of curry spices, and because what we are looking for is just the same texture and same mouthfeel to the normal, cooked version of it. And that's, so you kind of, thinking about like the flavor, the creaminess will come from nuts and seeds, and then there'll be like saltiness, and there'll be some tiny of acid and like heaps of spices. And we do concentrate the flavor in the dehydrator. So it's not watery, but it's just trial and error. And the great thing about, I suppose, raw food is that you just taste as you go. You know what I mean? Even like, when you make cake and you're making cakes and things like that, you don't have to wait for that to rise. You just taste and just and that's just going back to your like intuitive eating and making things. And I think that's like the most beautiful way to be creative and be in tune with what you want. Like cooking is just so beautiful, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on intuition again. I wrote it down like half an hour ago because a theme that has been coming up through what we've been talking about is intuition, listening to the body and listening to the foods. And by listening, I don't mean hold an apple up to your ear and see what it has to say, tune into the energy and tune into your own energy. And I think it's so hard because from when we're born, like we are taught not to listen to our intuition in this world. Mum and dad are having a fight and you go out and you say, hey, mum, what's wrong? And mum, the person who raised you, who has helped keep you alive, says to you, oh, there's nothing wrong. And you're like, well, intuitively, I felt there was something wrong. But my mum, who is this amazing person for me, is telling me that that's wrong. And so then we start to have this discordance, and that happens all the time throughout our life. And so then all of a sudden, we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s, whenever it is, someone says to start to eat intuitively. It's like, what the hell does that even mean? I don't even know. People are associating hunger with when they have, stomach cramps. Like, that's not hunger. That's your body cleansing and healing, right?
Yeah.
But when I eat, the pain goes away, and so we don't have this intuition, and we've taught not to follow it. And so I think it can be quite challenging for people to really do that. And I think, I think it's just a matter of kind of slowing down, and maybe you're slowing down when you're having a meal. Eat a meal in silence, right?
Yeah.
When was the last time we had a meal in silence? It doesn't happen. Look at your food, think about your food. And as we start to practice that more, we realize that we actually have perfect intuition. We're certainly born with perfect intuition, and we can rekindle that. And I think that allows us to navigate more of some of these, say, trickier subjects or newer subjects, around herbalism or around medicinal mushrooms or raw foods or really anything in life. There's plenty of people out there who say, just follow your intuition. It's like, well, yep, if we could, that would be a good way to make decisions, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's like the hardest thing that people actually like find what do you actually want? You know, like what do you want? What's your intuition? Like what is the body telling you? What's your mind telling you? Because we're just so numb, I think. I mean, from what you've said as well, like growing up, as well as just like noise, you know, like when you're like living in the city, there's just like noise everywhere and it's all the to-do lists everywhere. So I think a lot of people know when they go into the nature. I think we were just talking about it before we started too. We go into the nature and there's nothing else but the nature and you know, and yeah, just like looking up the sky, just looking at a tree. Like that's how you develop your intuition, I think. And when your body is clean and when you're willing, you know, you're open to the possibility, and that's when your intuition grows. And then it gets, as we say, this is just, it's a training. You know, you have to undo all this numbness, right? And it takes a while, but yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, it can be really hard too. It's interesting you say back to nature. I think that's totally on point. You know, I was chatting with a business friend yesterday and he said there's a global trend at the moment within business where we're going from, in the past it was control nature, and now within business it's back to nature. And there's so much power in that. And just in what you just said, as we all know, you know, get your feet on the ground, you know, connect physically with the earth. Look at some trees, maybe hug a tree if you want to make your friends think you're weird. You know?
Yes, definitely.
Go in the ocean. And I think that's a great way to reconnect with who we are and reconnect with our intuition and learn more about who we are. And I think also too, those things come at similar times in our life when we might start to try to eat raw foods, or we might start some medicinal mushrooms. We might start to cultivate some more of our spirituality, which perhaps in the past we just, you know, fobbed off as being some woo-woo, you know, as you kind of put it earlier. And as we start to focus on all of those other things, we start to experience more in life, have more of a tenderness and, you know, develop more of those things like compassion. Like the Dalai Lama talks about, and that gentleness, you know? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because someone that kind of, it's funny you just mentioned him, but someone was telling me that he fasts once a week because he wanted to know what it feels like to be hungry, you know, and it's a good reminder for him. I mean, like we just going back to that fasting is just so amazing that it cleanses your body and you're so much more sensitive to the noise, to your thoughts, like how you start arguing like in your head, you know? So fasting is like, I think one of the like most powerful, cheapest, because you're not eating, way to wait that for your health. And it's so natural. It's natural to be hungry. It's okay to be hungry. It's okay to skip a breakfast. It's okay to skip dinner. Like people freak out, you know. But
yeah, absolutely. A quote's coming to mind. You know, we all know that quote: "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." But the words that were said right after that, which I'm pretty sure that was Socrates. It might have been Plato. I can't remember the quote, but what was said right after that was, but continue to eat when sick is feeding the sickness. You know, and it's so true. You know, we think that we need to be eating all the time, and we just don't. And touching on what you said too, you know, when we fast, I treat it like we pull the layers of the onion back. You know, we all know that metaphor, and what we find is if we go deep enough, like what is at the bottom and the core of that onion is love and is gentleness and compassion and forgiveness. You know, these things which are kind of lost in our world in a lot of ways. You really need to focus on them. And through fasting, we can get back to that point, and through eating raw foods too, because it's gentle and it brings us back to who we are.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that. Oh, I love that you're talking about love the podcast.
Yeah. It's cool, you know, and that's been my experience. And
for sure. Yeah, I feel the same way.
You touched briefly on fasting, then one thing I did want to talk to you briefly about is a fasting mimicking diet. And I know that fasting isn't perhaps accessible or doable for everyone, and for whatever reason. How does a fasting mimicking diet actually work? Tell me a bit more.
Okay, so I'll just tell you a little bit of like my fasting routine to start. So I do about 45, 46 hour water fast every week, maybe a bit more often. And then I do about every 3 months, I kind of tap into more prolonged fasting. So it could be 3 days. I've done 5-day water fast, but I think while I was working at the same time, it was a bit hard. Yeah, it's pretty hard. But the science does show that the most beneficial length of time that you water fast is 5 days. But, doing water fast for 5 days is really hard for most of us. But then the scientist, or maybe a doctor, Dr. Longo, he found the way that you can still eat a small amount, but get the same effect from 5-day water fast. So that's the fast mimicking diet that he kind of started talking about. And so I started offering this advanced reset that's based on fast mimicking diet. So the first day is a bit more higher calories, about 1,000 something calories. So still like small amounts. And then from 2 to 5 days, then you're reducing the calories even further. So the first 1 or 2 days, depending on how you've been eating already, then you start getting into ketosis. So you're using fat as an energy source. And then autophagy starts, depending on the person too, but 3rd, 4th day, autophagy starts. So that means that your body is actually clearing your damaged and old cells. So it's not even about, this reset is not even about detoxifying, because it does do that, or weight loss programs, even though, yes, people do lose weight from that. But it's more of that this cleansing is happening in the deeper cellular level. So I'm like super excited about this reset that's happening once a month. It's not for everyone. I think, those people who are going to participate, they need to be eating healthy already, and maybe starting to kind of explore some sort of fasting. It doesn't have to be 1 day, but or like 40 hours or anything. But if you can go longer than, say, 12 hours, just starting to do some intermittent fasting or something like that, then you are ready to do more advanced. But if you're eating like sad diet, then probably this is just too advanced. But yeah, so this is it's more the fast mimicking diet.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense to me. And so is it more like on those kind of 2nd, 3rd day, it's just more fats and things kind of?
Yeah. Yes. It's the particular like macro has to be applied for the diet. So I kind of calculated all of that. So that will lead to autophagy. So the protein should be low, carbohydrates moderate, and more fat-based diet. But it's not a keto diet, because you're still having some sort of carbohydrates. But the most important thing is the lowering the protein level, because when you're fasting, you're not building right now. You're cleansing, and you're getting rid of those old and damaged cells. So the protein has to be low. And then when you're done, then you start increasing the protein, because this is the time to build. And it's interesting thing is that while you're fasting, your growth hormone level actually goes up. So it's even easier for you to build muscles after fasting.
Yeah, body just runs more efficiently, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. This has been a beautiful conversation. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions for you. I mean, what's your routine like?
My routine, like just overall?
Like a morning, like what you do in the morning, like how does the sauna, like do you have sauna every day? Like when do you have that?
Sure. Yeah, my routine at the moment is get up and gosh, I sound like such a surfer now, but at the moment, since we've been living up here, it's get up and see what the surf's doing. And whether there's surf or not, the first thing I kind of focus on is some sort of movement. I was doing meditation first thing for quite a while, but the last couple of weeks that's changed, and that's okay with me. So get up and I'm either going for a bike ride or I'm going for a surf or I'm going for a walk. And then I'll come back from that and jump in the sauna if I have time. It's not every day at the moment, so it might be 3 times a week, I would say. If it's rainy, I'll jump in the sauna. And yeah, then I'll get out. Sometimes it's a cold shower. Sometimes just rinse off. And then I kind of go about my day. Either I'll meditate then or I'll find some time later in the day. Sometimes I'm still getting up and meditating first thing. So for me in the morning, it's about movement. It's about setting some intention, and sometimes even I've been reading a little bit. I've been letting it kind of shift and morph. In the past I'd be like so strict, like, okay, meditate for half an hour and practice gratitude and write this down and do this thing. Yeah. I'm just kind of letting it flow a little bit more. I said, sometimes I'm even reading in the morning now. I actually find it's a great way, a great time to read, because we're still in this like theta brainwave state. I feel like the information goes in. I was also trialing a thing a while ago where I would listen to theta brainwaves. I made this recording where I recorded some affirmations and beliefs that I wanted to program into my life over a theta brainwave sound. And then I would play that. I would wake up and I'd play that in my ears for the first like 20, 30 minutes when I'm still in that kind of slumber.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
So like when you go into hypnosis, they put you into a theta brainwave state, and it's like deep learning, quick learning. In the first 6 years of our life, we're in theta brainwave. So it's just like being programmed. And I had some beliefs and things I wanted to change. So I was doing that for a while when I was falling asleep in the evening and when I was waking up in the morning, and I did that for 6 weeks and it was really cool. Anyway, so that's kind of my morning. And then, I'm eating raw foods at the moment. So I'm fasting until lunchtime. Like once we get off this podcast, I'll have my first food for the day. So just sipping water. Sometimes I've been having some lemon in there just to get some astringent juice into the body. I'll break my fast at lunchtime with just a bowl of one fruit. It'll probably be grapes today. And then
nice.
In a few hours time, I might have some papaya, and then dinner.
Papaya again.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of good papaya at the moment.
Yeah.
And then dinner time will be a simple salad, lettuce, tomato, capsicum, maybe a touch of avo, although I'm kind of minimizing the fats at the moment. And that's kind of how I'm eating. And then, over the dinner table, we're always sharing 3 things we're grateful for that day. And then we stroke our ego. We say, what are 3 brags, like 3 things that we kind of like.
That's cool. I like that addition.
Have a bit of fun with that. And then after dinner, meditate for a little bit, read a book. Been reading a lot lately. And that's kind of my day. So there's always some movement there. There's always some sweating, whether it's sauna or bike or running on the beach or even surfing can get really hot. So that's really important. Eating really cleanly is really important. And fasting during the morning up until around lunch. And it's amazing. And my partner is quite spiritual, as you know. So we have lots of great conversations. I'm learning more about the zodiac at the moment. And so my life is really like clean eating and learning and expanding and trying to experience the most that this life has to offer,
Yeah. I mean, I always say to people like being healthy is not the goal, of this life. Right? Like we want to be healthy because we want to make an impact. We want to have a vibrant life, and we want to have amazing conversation with people, and we want to be a really good person. We want to be a good friend. That's why we're doing all these like healthy things.
It's a really good point, Yoko. When I was younger, I was like, I just want to be the healthiest person in the world, and hey, in fairness, that actually got me really far. But when I got to this point of kind of arriving in a way at that point where I've done heaps of fasting. I'm eating so cleanly. I'm feeling amazing. My skin looks good. I have energy. I have sex drive, all this stuff. I kind of realized, well, actually, like the reason I was really doing it is so I can do things I want to in life. I can help people. I can share. I can educate from a place of health, right? This is like, it's the vehicle. Your vehicle is looking great. You look amazing, right? You look vibrant, and when we have this vehicle working and functioning optimally, then we can go about our life from a better place, and that's what health really is. It's being 100%. Able to do life,
Yeah. 100%.
Well, I'm going to just bask in the ambience of this conversation. This has been beautiful.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me, Alex.
Yeah, thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you, what are some ways that they can work with you, and how can they find you?
I love hanging out on Instagram right now. So on Instagram, Shokuiku, or
hey, can you spell that?
SHOKUIKU. It actually means food education. My background is Japanese, and that's what it means. Anyway, yeah. Or of course, website shokuikuaustralia.com. Probably those two places. But yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And all the best with everything you're doing. I think you're doing some amazing work in the world and really helping people. So thank you so much.
You too. Like you've been such a big part of, what I've been doing. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.